Here's a PragerU video that wants to fearmonger about trans people.
Sat there and questioned, do I want a sex change? And it's something that I still think about, like, do I want to? But I don't think it is. When I saw the word non-binary, genderqueer, and I read into it and I heard these people speaking, I was like, that is me. Non-binary genderqueer is that you do not identify in a gender. You are just you. You are a mixture of all different things. You're your own special creation. That's how I take it. It's not, I'm not male or female.
Well, that's not exactly what Sam was saying. They're not saying they chose to be non-binary. They're not choosing their gender. They're saying that it's simply what they are.
Today we are told that male and female are one and the same.
No, we're not. If they were one and the same, and there were no distinction between the two at all, then there'd be no such thing as being trans. Being trans means that the gender that was placed on your birth certificate is contrary to the gender that you actually are. The gender on your birth certificate can't be contrary to your actual gender if all genders are one and the same.
This denial of male-female differences has led to the astonishing belief that men and women are not born male or female. They are whatever gender they say they are.
Those are not contrary assertions. Trans women will commonly say they were born women, and trans men and non-binary folks will often say they were born those genders as well. A lot of the confusion here, I think, has to do with not understanding what exactly trans rights advocates mean when using these words. When folks say people are whatever gender they say they are not talking about what their anatomy is or what their chromosomes are. They're talking about their own self-concept. They're talking about an intuition they have about themselves, which is not absolutely correlated with or defined by anatomy or chromosomes.
Facebook went so far as to offer its users over 50 genders to choose from. Know what a demi-boy is? Me neither. The idea that gender identification is now a personal choice might sound enlightened to some, but it's actually a very anti-scientific view of one of the essential facts of life.
It would be anti-scientific to insist that people's intuitions about what gender they are and how they identify didn't frequently fail to correlate with the chromosomes or anatomy that society typically associates with one gender or another. This is a phenomenon that has been recorded across many cultures for thousands of years. The same cannot be said, by the way, about people claiming to be transracial or making tired-ass jokes about being helicopters. The fact that the gender with which a person identifies often differs from what gender folks typically associate with their anatomy is a fact which is widely and thoroughly scientifically documented.
Men and women are inherently different. Their brains are different, their hormones are different, their chromosomes are different, and of course, their bodies are different.
None of those things reliably distinguishes men from women. With respect to brains, there are some brain features which are more common among men and others which are more common among women. But these differences are like height differences between men and women. While being tall is more common among men and being short is more common among women, a man can be of any height and a woman can be of any height. The same is true of these brain differences. While some brain features are more common among men and others are more common among women, a man can have or lack these features and a woman can have or lack these features. There are no more male brains and female brains than there is a male height and a female height. With respect to hormones, well, nowadays you can choose your hormones. We have the technology to do that, so I don't see how hormones are relevant. With respect to chromosomes, not only do they not perfectly correlate with gender identity, they don't even necessarily correlate with the rest of a person's reproductive characteristics. For example, women with androgen insensitivity syndrome have XY chromosomes, which are typically associated with men, but they are born with the primary reproductive characteristics and at puberty develop secondary reproductive characteristics that our culture typically associates with women.
No amount of peer-reviewed papers from gender studies departments can change this.
Well, how many papers from medical journals, psychology journals, and biology journals could get you to accept that your grasp of the subject is oversimplified? Because there are thousands which describe differences in both gender and reproductive biology in a much more nuanced way than you are describing them.
But that won't stop the progressive elites who run our universities, news media, many of our biggest companies, and even our high schools and elementary schools from trying. For their efforts, women will pay an especially high price. That's because the men and women are the same argument invariably leads women to be judged against a male standard. Or to put it another way, to be more of a woman has to be more like a man. She has to want to have casual sex like a man, to serve in combat like a man, to pursue a career with single-minded intensity like a man.
If you listen to some other conservatives, they seem to think it's the other way around. They think that liberal elites are trying to feminize everyone with their soy and their man buns. So which is it? Is everyone being held to male standards, or are they being held to feminine standards? Also, it's interesting that Ashley here isn't saying that it's bad to pressure people to have casual sex, or to fight in combat, or pursue a career with single-minded intensity. She isn't saying that these are bad standards per se. She's only saying that it's bad to hold women to such crappy standards. She says nothing against holding men to these standards. And a common thing I see folks who advocate for traditional gender roles do is conflate the call for acceptance of women who want to do these things with telling all women that they have to aim for these things. Accepting women who want to do them places no obligation on anyone else to do them.
Of course, there are exceptions, but the overwhelming majority of women aren't seeking casual sex, don't have the physical strength of men, and don't share the same work-life priorities as men.
And there are plenty of men who don't have any interest in these things either, so maybe these things shouldn't be a standard which anyone is pressured to meet.
Ironically, this quest for sameness is occurring at a time when science is telling us more emphatically than ever that we are different. So what your grandmother took for granted, men and women are different, science now confirms. But there is no room for science in, say, stores like Target or Toys R Us, where toys are no longer divided into the boys section and the girls section, or in a North Carolina school district where students can no longer be called boys and girls, but only students, or in college dorms where co-ed bathrooms and even co-ed bedrooms are increasingly common.
This is an argument that starts with premises that aren't true and draws a conclusion that wouldn't follow even if they were. First of all, there are no physiological studies, neurological studies, or anatomical studies that say that human biology fits everybody neatly into either an inseminator category or a gestator category with no exceptions, overlap, or fuzzy distinctions whatsoever. The closer we look at these things, the more nuance we see, and the less we see reason for essentialism. That's not to say that there are no distinctions, only that they are nuanced enough to make it hard to justify organizing society around them. Secondly, even if there were clear categorical distinctions, it would not follow that toys, bathrooms, or dormitories ought therefore be segregated on the basis of those distinctions.
For the tiny percentage of people who experience gender dysphoria, we should have nothing but compassion. We should do everything we can to help them and protect their dignity. But we don't need to overturn biologically defined sex differences to do so.
Well, if what you mean by biologically defined sex differences is that some people can inseminate and other people can gestate, then nobody is asking for anyone to overturn that distinction, whatever that would even mean. Literally nobody is denying that some people make sperm and other people make eggs. All that is being asked is for you to recognize what biologists actually say, which is that not everybody fits neatly into either an inseminator category or gestator category. You should also recognize the fact that whether one can inseminate or gestate, or neither as is frequently the case, need not determine one's gender identity, and that gender is far more nuanced than just man and woman. And also that you don't need to have gender dysphoria to be transgender. That's transmedicalism and it's pointless gatekeeping.
But that's what's happening. Using the wrong pronoun at the office might get you fired.
This makes it sound as though if you accidentally use the wrong pronoun once, that will get you fired, which I've never seen happen at any time or in any place. You are likely to get fired if you insist on deliberately using the wrong pronoun, and why shouldn't you? If you insist on deliberately calling an employee or coworker something you know they don't want to be called, that's grounds for termination even in cases that have nothing to do with gender identity. Deliberately using a nickname that a coworker has asked you not to use could get you fired. Why should pronouns be any different?
In Canada, it might land you in court.
Again, only if you insist on calling someone something you know they don't want to be called, and even then, only in limited cases. Legally, it's treated the same as calling someone an ethnic slur.
In mixed martial arts, as we have seen, it can lead to getting your head bashed in.
Oh my goodness, are you telling me that even mixed martial arts might not be safe nowadays? What kind of world are we living in when women can't even feel safe kicking each other in the head anymore? I assume this is a reference to Fallon Fox, the transgender MMA fighter who fractured her opponent's skull. Her critics, of course, assume that this happened because she is trans. But you don't have to be fighting a trans woman to get a severe head injury in MMA. Women injure other women in boxing, kickboxing, and MMA all the time. The University of Toronto did a study that found that MMA fighters suffer traumatic brain injury in a third of all professional bouts. So why are people talking about trans women as though they are the only people who are capable of rendering such an injury?
Apparently, this is a small price to pay in a world where we must all genuflect to political correctness. Even after being hospitalized, Tamika Brents knew she had to toe the PC line. When asked how she explained why she lost so badly to a man who said he was a woman, she said, "I can't answer whether it's because she was born a man or not, because I'm not a doctor."
That sounds pretty reasonable to me. And also, this one instance is an anecdote. This isn't a statistic showing that transgender athletes injure their opponents at disproportionately high rates.
Vice magazine, writing about the incident, had no sympathy for Brents. Why should they? As they wrote, biological sex isn't black and white. But in virtually every instance, it is.
What constitutes virtually every instance is not specifically defined in this video, and I suspect the folks at PragerU and I would differ with respect to what exactly constitutes virtually every. Sometimes the distinction between people with insemination biology and people with gestation biology is naturally quite blurry or inapplicable. This is especially the case when anatomy and physiology are altered through surgery or hormone replacement therapy. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.